At the heart of our readings this morning, there is a resounding message of mercy. It's a clear and simple message of God's desire to save his people, to lead his people, to gather his people. It is the simple and clear message of Christianity, one that often, I think, gets blurred by the complications of human affairs. Jesus was obedient to the Father for the sake of our salvation. We heard it in our gospel. This is why the Father loves me, Jesus says, because I lay down my life in order to take it up again. The obedience of the Son is what unites him to the Father. But obedience is like a cuss word for our culture today. We can't use it in polite conversation. It's not used well. It's a word that suggests dependence and silence and relying on other people to guide us, all those gross things that none of us really want to do. And we think that this makes us weak, obedience. Most will say that to live like that makes us slaves, mindlessly following the boss who gives all the orders. Or to stick with the gospel metaphor, like dumb sheep whose survival depends on their dependence. And maybe we've come to buy into that perception of obedience. Maybe the wolf of self-sufficiency is on the prowl in our hearts. Maybe we hear it growling in our minds, trying to convince us to do it all on our own. It's a wolf mentality. To stick with friends until they get what they want and then go off on their own. The community is only useful to them as long as they can keep taking for themselves. This is the way of the wolf. Wolves want to divide and scatter and instill fear so that it's easier to feed. Divide and take is the motto of the wolf. But obedience looks much different. Its mission is to unite and receive. The goal of obedience is to take us beyond our petty appetites for the passing things of this world, which is how we spend so much of our energy. Obedience to Christ is meant to lead us on a path to a far greater sense of fulfillment, a lasting fulfillment, rather than an easy kill and a quick meal. And that sense of fulfillment is possible, at least partially, in this world. But it will only happen if our relationship with Christ is the criteria, the measure that we use for all of life. Because I think our tendency is to say, okay, when it comes to how I treat people, I'll use Christ as the measure. When it comes to how I pray, I'll use Christ as the measure. But when it comes to how I make financial decisions, I'll use the measure of success. Or when I think about where I'll go to college, I'll use the measure of prestige. Or when I think about my social life and how far I go with my girlfriend or boyfriend, I'll use the measure of pleasure. And so we divide. We divide our lives into different sections and use a different measure for every area. Friends, this is the way of the wolf, to divide and scatter and feed. He changes his method of hunting according to the weakness of his prey. We divide our lives so that we can conquer them, so that we can be the master of our own destinies and be in control, we think, of our lives. But in doing so, we alienate ourselves from others. And this is why the wolf always ends up alone. Because in the end, the wolf is only concerned about himself. But we are not wolves. And life is not about beating other people to the prize. We people of faith can't go through life thinking that it's there for us to conquer and to tear it to shreds. We people of faith know that life is a gift that is to be received, not taken. And so a life of faith is meant to be shared in community, and not in a way that we are competing against each other, but in a way that allows us to help each other to be faithful, to help each other to appreciate the gifts that we have been given. This is the way of the sheep, which for us doesn't mean blind obedience, but it means following with intelligence and a desire to grow in our understanding. It doesn't take away the difficulties of life or spare us the drama that we have to face, but it does help us to know that we are never alone, and that the Good Shepherd will always be there to guide us and to accompany us along the way. All of us have to guard our hearts and our minds from the way of the wolf, which is focused on self-sufficiency and instant gratification. We're called to embrace the life of the Lamb, a life of humility, a life spent in community, a life of belonging to those around us. Because in the words of St. Peter, there is no salvation through anyone else, nor is there any other name under heaven given to the human race by which we are to be saved. Jesus is not the wolf of God. He is the Lamb of God, who offers himself for us and who calls us to do the same.